I'm Henny B, and welcome to the World War I Stories podcast, where history comes alive through the voices of those who lived it. Some scenes in these stories may be too graphic for sensitive listeners, so listener discretion is advised. Hooked on the podcast? Now you can hold the stories in your hands. World War I Stories, Tales Beyond the Trenches, Volume 1 is now out on Amazon. 10 unforgettable tales of resilience, loss, and hope from the people forever changed by war. Available in paperback and on Kindle. Today's episode, That is Where We Lost. It was not often that Tatl'ah found himself torn like this. In the past, he had always been the level-headed man that others relied on to settle disputes. But he knew already that this situation would be different. If the rumor was true, he would be forced to choose a side, his father's or his son's. As he trudged through the ankle-high snow, Tatl'ah could see the wisp of white smoke rising from his family's kukuli. With every step, his anxiety rose. He had ventured into Williams Lake to buy chicken feed. The settlers had built their town there during the Caribou Gold Rush of the 1860s, on land that he had been told once belonged to his people. It was there he overheard the news that troubled him. At the age of 43, Tatl'ah was too young to remember when this land belonged to his people, the Tsilhqot'in, but he was old enough to have heard the stories from the elders, and he knew the bitterness men like his father harbored towards the British. So when the proprietor at the feed store clasped him on the shoulder and proclaimed just how proud he should be, with your son joining the king's army, Tatl'ah slipped into a daze, but only for a moment. "What do you mean?" he asked of the shopkeeper. The man, Charlie, beamed as he spoke. "A group of boys, including your boy Kokum, they went into the recruitment office there." He pointed across the street where what used to be a supply store had been converted for the war. "I was standing outside when they came out, all of them excited about their trip to France. About time your people came around." No sooner had Charlie finished his account than Tatl'ah walked out, without the feed which had been the very reason for his trip. "We named him Kokum for the spirit of bravery we hoped he would carry. The old woman said such a name would bring him to courage, to wisdom, to the strength of the ancestors. And here he was, joining the British Army, attempting to prove he was indeed brave." He heard the commotion from within the kukuli as he approached. So it's begun already. He thought about picking up his pace to join the boisterous discussion sooner, but in the end decided against it. Why rush towards unhappiness, he thought to himself. His kukuli was strategically placed next to his father's. The structure was dug partially into the ground to benefit from the natural insulation the earth provided against the harsh Canadian winters. Wooden poles were used to construct a framework, which was then covered with layers of bark, earth, and thatch to form the roof. A central hole in the roof served a dual purpose. It was used as an entrance and allowed smoke from the indoor fire to escape. He stopped as he prepared to climb up. He could hear 3 voices from inside: his wife Sulina, his son Kokum, and his father Nakazdi. He took a deep breath, preparing to join the conversation, and slowly climbed up the sloped roof and towards the entrance. As he reached the peak, he turned around and started his descent down the ladder, which started at the hole and angled down towards a far wall. This alignment kept the ladder far enough from the fire below as to not catch fire itself. The kukuli grew quiet as he reached the floor and stepped off the ladder. Like many others, theirs was built for the long winters with a fire in the center. The space was circular and open, the earth walls rising around them. Along the edges were the family's beds, low platforms of wood and packed earth. Fresh spruce boughs had been laid down for softness and scent, with deer and moose hides stretched across them. Over these lay the thick wool blankets that had come through trade. He glanced around the room, softly lit by the fire in the center. Near the fire stood his wife, Selina. He crossed to her and gave her a light kiss on the cheek. She touched his arm in silence, as if already sensing the weight he carried. Nakazji, his father, stood near one of the beds, glaring at his grandson Kokum, who was sitting close by. He had never been one for pleasantries, and he started in straight away. "Tatl'ah, you must talk sense into your son." Tatl'ah raised both hands, asking for quiet. To his surprise, his father paused. "I've heard," he said. "I was told in town, at the feed store. But, father, this is a matter for me and my son. I ask you to go to your kukuli and rest." Nakazji's eyes narrowed. "You would have me walk away from my grandson?" "No, he is yours, but he is mine also." Tatl'ah knew the right was his to send him away, and the old man knew it too. Yet, if he allowed him to stay, Nakazji would root himself like stone, certain his presence was needed. He motioned towards the ladder and the hole in the ceiling. "I must speak with my son alone." The crackling of the fire was the only sound in the room now. Nakazji lowered his eyes in acceptance and turned towards the ladder. As she passed, Selina brushed his arm lightly and gave him a gentle smile. She held that same smile when her gaze shifted to her son, and she carried it with her as she climbed after her father-in-law. He sat on the bed next to his son. Even now he knew his father was most likely above the ladder, just outside the opening, primed to listen to every word. Britain had been at war for over a year, and by extension, so had Canada. No matter how much the older generation wished it were not so, they, like every other nation now bound within Canada, were Canadians too. The two sat in silence, both gazing into the fire. It was Kokum who broke the silence. "I know what you're going to say, father. How can I volunteer to fight beside the very man that took our land, that oppressed us at every turn?" Tatl'ah turned his head towards his son. "No, son, that is not what I was going to say. Unlike your grandfather, I accepted our fate long ago. The old way of life is not wholly gone. Look around you. This home is just as part of our culture as anything else. We still have that." "Are you saying that you understand?" his son asked him. "I would not say that exactly, but I do understand that this is all you know. Neither you or I never knew what your grandfather knew. This land before the white man. So I can see why you would choose to fight for it," he returned. "Grandfather is upset." Tatl'ah looked up at the opening in the roof. The sun had shifted just enough that his father's shadow stretched across the rungs of the ladder. He let his eyes rest on it a moment before speaking. "I imagine he is." He turned back to his son. "You must remember he sees the world differently than you. And if I sit and think on it, I know I see it differently than you as well. He fights for the past, son. You fight for the future." "What about you, father? What do you fight for?" Kokum asked. Tatl'ah had never asked himself that. His father had taken part in an uprising against the colonizers. And him? What had he done? Had he fought for anything at all? "I suppose, son, I fight for you, for your mother and for your brother. Maybe not with weapons or even with words, but in my own way I fight to keep our heritage alive." "But how, father?" "Well, we still live in a kukuli. You and your brother bear strong Tsilhqot'in names. We grow our own food, raise our chickens, and barter with neighbors and shopkeepers in town for what else we need. We do not use their money system. I would say that resisting those things is its own form of fighting, don't you think?" "I guess so. Look, son, I understand that the past will never return. I understand that we are now, perhaps forever, a part of Britain. And I understand this too. You and those who come after you may one day take pride in that, and may have to fight to keep it." And with that he stood, made his way to the ladder, and began the climb that would bring him face to face with the old ways. Since he was a child, he and his father had sat by the Eladco, the river that settlers had renamed the Fraser many years ago. At any given time, people from the nations of Tsilhqot'in and Tsilhqot'in could be found there, fishing for salmon or traveling on to distant villages. Now, as the sun set before them, Tatl'ah wondered how to begin the conversation with his father, who sat in a silence uncharacteristic of him. He heard his father take a deep breath and begin to speak as he pointed to a spot just downriver. "It's been 50 years, but I will always remember that right over there. That is where we lost." Tatl'ah had heard the stories many times before. First had come the sickness, carried by settlers into their valleys. Smallpox spread like fire, leaving whole villages empty. When at last the people began to recover, another threat arrived. Crews came to cut a road straight through Tsilhqot'in land, and they never asked permission. To the chiefs, it was invasion. They gathered their warriors and struck the road crews, hoping to drive them out. For a while, they held their ground. But the colonizers answered with soldiers, and when they could not win by force, they used deceit. They called the leaders to a peace talk, then bound them in chains. In Quesnel, they hanged them before the settlers, and with them, much of the old way of life. Nakazdi had fought in the uprising, and he carried the pain of the response with him still. He felt it each time he stepped out of his kukuli. Tatl'ah never interrupted when his father spoke of those days that shaped him so deeply. He had long made a habit of only listening. "That road behind us started it all," Nakazdi said. "But that turn in the river is where I think we lost. Instead of speaking to the ones in charge, we lined up there and struck the men building the road. I often wonder, if we had tried to stop them with words, would it have changed anything?" The silence between them felt tense to Tatl'ah. He never really knew what to say in these moments since he had yet to be born when the uprising happened. "He has to live his own life, father," he said finally. Nakazdi's eyes stayed fixed on the water. "This all used to be ours. No roads, no cities. Rich land where we grew crops and tended animals. Elk and moose roamed, and this river was alive with salmon, with boats, with voices. We had freedom. We had land. We had no king. For centuries we had it all. And now, Kokum chooses to set it aside to fight with them? Tell me, how am I supposed to forgive that, my son?" Tatl'ah rose and stood before his father. "I've sat here year after year with you. We watched the sunsets together, and I listened in silence as you told the stories I have loved since I was a child. I held those times close, maybe too close. If I had brought my sons here, if they had heard your words as I did, perhaps they would feel more for what has been lost." Nakazdi's eyes welled up with tears as he spoke next. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps Kokum is too removed from what once was." Tatl'ah lowered himself to his knees until their faces met. "They never knew a time when this land was ours, and neither did I. Kokum is leaving us, and he may never come back. That is what we face now, father." Speaking the truth aloud shook something loose inside him. Fear rose, raw and unhidden. Tatl'ah began to weep and fell into his father's arms. Nakazdi wrapped him close, and for the first time in many years, let his own tears flow. There was always a quiet stillness that settled over the Kikuli at dinner. Selina would portion the meal and, without fail, set a share in the place where Kokum used to sit. He had been gone for 2 weeks, and in those 2 weeks a sadness had fallen over the family. As much as they attempted to live life as normal as they could, the dark cloud of Kokum's absence always overshadowed the attempts. This evening they dined on 2 rabbits that had been trapped by their 16-year-old son Tsilhqot'in. He had built a snare trap using a length of wire looped and fastened to a bent sapling along a narrower run where rabbits passed beneath the brush. He had set the loop just high enough for a rabbit's head to slip through, guiding it with a pair of small sticks so the animal had little choice but to push forward. When the rabbit passed, the sapling sprung, the wire tightened, and the catch was made. The family ate in silence, the only sound the crackle of the fire and the scrape of wooden spoons against clay bowls. Selina's eyes lingered on the empty place where she had set Kokum's share, but she said nothing. Even Tsilhqot'in, who once filled meals with restless chatter, ate quietly, glancing now and then towards his mother. When the bowls were empty, Tatl'ah rose to step outside. He felt her eyes on him and paused. Selina's look was steady, soft, the kind that carried words without speaking them. He remembered what she had said before when Kokum left. "Don't keep the river to yourself. Take Tsilhqot'in. Let him hear the stories while he is still young." He turned to his son. "Come with me," he said. Tsilhqot'in straightened, uncertain, but when he saw his mother's faint nod, he set down his spoon and followed. Together they stepped into the cool evening air, the sky already stained with the first hues of sunset, and made their way to the river. Nakazdi was already there when they arrived, seated on a fallen log that rested just above the bank. He did not rise, only shifted slightly and patted the space beside him. Tsilhqot'in hesitated, but Tatl'ah gave him a nod, and the boy lowered himself onto the log. Tatl'ah sat on the other side, the 3 of them now in a row, facing the slow-moving water. The river caught the light of the setting sun, its surface a ribbon of fire stretching west. For a time, none of them spoke. The only sounds were the current slipping past the stones and the distant call of a loon. At last, Nakazdi spoke, his voice rough but not unkind. "So, Tsilhqot'in, tonight you sit with us." "Yes, grandfather," the boy answered, keeping his eyes on the river. Nakazdi studied him a moment, then gave a single nod. "Good. You should hear what the water carries and remember what it has seen." Nakazdi let the silence stretch, his gaze never leaving the river. Then he raised a hand and pointed upstream. "Do you see that bend, Tsilhqot'in? When I was no older than you, I came here with my own father in the spring. The ice had just broken and the salmon began their run. That year was the fullest I ever saw. The water shimmered with them, so thick you could have crossed the river on their backs." Tsilhqot'in's eyes followed the current, though he could only see the fading light. Nakazdi's voice dropped lower. "We speared them one after another until the baskets split. We dried the flesh, we smoked it, stored it. Our people ate well through the winter that followed. That was life, grandson. The river gave, and we gave thanks. It was enough." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Now, the fish are fewer. The settlers cut the forests and the streams silt over. They take what they do not understand, and one day, perhaps, this river will not give as it once did." Tsilhqot'in shifted on the log, glancing first at his father, then back at his grandfather. "But Isn't life better now? We have flour, sugar, even rifles for hunting. We trade for blankets and tools. Wouldn't that be easier than the old way?" Nakashi contemplated for a moment, and he said nothing, his eyes fixed hard on the water. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "Easier, maybe, but better? No. What you call better is only dependence. We gave thanks to the land, and it gave back. Now we give to the traders, and they take more than they ever give. Remember that, grandson. Easier is not the same as better." Tatl'ah felt the weight of the exchange press against him. He had once asked the same question in his youth, and the answer had never left him. Now it was Sei Khan's turn to wrestle with it. Tatl'ah laid a hand on his son's shoulder. "It is a fair question," he said. "When I was your age, I thought the same. It is easy to see the goods in the trader's store and think they make life better. But what your grandfather speaks of is not just life being harder or easier. It's about who decides how we live. Before, it was us. Now, it is others." Sei Khan looked between them, caught between the weight of two generations. The Kazi's stern gaze did not soften, but he gave a single nod, as though conceding that his grandson's words deserved to be spoken. Sei Khan drew his knees up and stared at the current. "Grandfather, what do you think Kokum is fighting for?" Nakashi turned his head sharply, his eyes narrowing as if the question itself carried a sting. "He fights for the king, for the ones who took this land and never gave it back. That is what they tell him to fight for." "But at school," Sei Khan said carefully, "they tell us it's for freedom, for honor, for protecting the weak. Our teacher says the soldiers are brave men who fight for a better world." The Kazi let out a short, bitter laugh. "Freedom, honor, better for whom? Do you think the king cares for our freedom? Do you think the settlers who hanged our chiefs and built roads through our graves care for honor? No, they send our young men to die for their battles, not ours." The boy grew quiet, troubled. What he had been taught in school did not match what he now heard, and yet he could not ignore the certainty in his grandfather's voice. Tatl'ah sat in silence, his hands resting in his lap. He had nothing to add. Deep down, he knew the world would move on without his father's blessing, and Kokum had already chosen to step into it. He only hoped he could keep Sei Khan at home, and he prayed that Kokum's choice did not cost his son his life. It was still dark when Selina shook him awake, her hands trembling. "Sei Khan is gone! He is gone!" she sobbed, her words breaking through tears. Tatl'ah sat straight up, his mind slow to clear, but the weight of her voice sank in. "What do you mean?" She pointed across the kikuli. The bed where Sei Khan should have been was empty, the blankets untouched. They had gone to bed early, leaving Sei Khan to his own choosing. They had thought he would be by the river with friends spearfishing. "He probably slept outside again," Tatl'ah said, rubbing the last of the fog from his eyes. "He likes that." "I thought of that," Sulin's voice cracked. "I looked. He's not there either." Tatl'ah pulled on his boots, already knowing the comfort of his words would not reach her. "I will go to town. Maybe he and his friends decided to go there this morning for something." His walk to the town was tinged with anxiety. Even though Sei Khan was prone to leaving unannounced with his friends, something about this felt different, and he could not pinpoint why. The early morning sun shimmered off of newly washed shop windows. Tatl'ah decided to check with the blacksmith's shop. The blacksmith was Sei Khan's favorite. Watching the men inside forge everyday items from hot steel fascinated him, but he had not been seen there in a few days. Next, he checked the general store, and then the butcher shop, two other places that he and his friends enjoyed frequenting. Tatl'ah received the same answer there. Tsilhqot'in had not been seen recently. He stiffened at the door as he meant to enter the feed store. He was not sure why. He turned his head around and saw the recruitment office. Letting go of the door handle, he turned and walked across the street. "Excuse me, sir," he asked the clerk behind the desk as he entered. There was another man speaking to the clerk, but Tatl'ah rudely ignored him. "I can help you in just a moment, sir," the man behind the desk said as he raised his right hand. The name on his tunic read Randolph. "I'm sorry, I cannot wait. Did a young man come in here? My son. His name is Tsilhqot'in." "Sir, if you please, take a seat. I will help you in a moment." Without warning, his temper, which had rarely been an issue, exploded. "Answer me now! Did my son come in here?" The soldier stood. "Sir, I ask you to keep it calm." "The hell I will! I'm looking for my son. You've already taken one of my sons, and I need to know if you took the other." "Okay, hold on." He grabbed the stack of papers next to him and ruffled through them. "How did you spell his name?" "Tsekhkan. The man slipped a file out of the pile. "Yeah, looks like he came in late last evening, just before dark." Tatl'ah's head swam with the revelation. He started to sway on his feet and sat on the floor. "He's only 16. File here says he's 18. His voice rose as he began, but he caught himself as he finished. "He's only 16. "I'm sorry, sir, but he is enlisted into the king's army." "Where is he now? Do you know?" "Well, normally new recruits have to wait a while before they get sent out, but it says here in the file that he was going to take the train that leaves this morning at 10 a.m. "What time is it now?" Tatl'ah asked. "It's 9:45, sir." Rising to his feet, he hurried out of the recruiting office and made a left towards the train station. The town had started to come to life during his search, and now he had to dodge people, wagons, and the occasional motor car as he weaved his way through the narrow streets. Finally, he reached the station. He stood in silence, unable to think. People on the platform waved to blurred faces in the train's windows. A whistle cut through the air and smoke poured from the engine. The wheels began to turn. Time froze for him as the train and his youngest son pulled away. You've been listening to World War I Stories, Tales Beyond the Trenches. If this episode stayed with you, if it stirred something quiet or left you in stillness, share it, follow the show, leave a rating, help keep these stories alive. Our first collection now lives on Kindle. Search World War I Stories, Tales Beyond the Trenches, Volume 1 in your Kindle app, and carry these echoes with you. For glimpses behind the curtain and stories between the stories, join me on Instagram at WWIPod_HennyB. And if you'd like to see your name in the credits, become a producer. Visit our Patreon at patreon.com/World War I Stories and help power the next tale into existence. Thank you for walking back in time with me.